Hello everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. Hold on, time to fix the screen. And fixed! So, welcome back to the President Hamilton Timeline, Episode 4. Today we're going to be going through the years of 1860 all the way to 1880. Starting off with 1860, we have the 1860 Wiyot Massacre, which involves natives, as well as the 1860 presidential election where Federalist Congressman Abraham Lincoln, Republican Senator William Seward, Southern Democrat John Breckinridge, Constitutional Union Senator John Bell, and Northern Democrat Stephen Douglas all go to no contest. Nobody gets enough electoral votes to obtain a majority, meaning the top three, Lincoln, Seward, and Breckinridge, will go to a contiguous hard to pronounce actually, but a contingent election in 1861, which begins the year which the House of Representatives will select Republican Senator William Seward to become the 15th president. Which the secession will happen, which will lead to the Civil War. President Seward, on day one of being president, will abolish slavery on day one. Going on to 1862, President Seward would sign the Pacific Railways Act, which would create the Transcontinental Railroad. Speaking of which, is that thing still around? Like, you would think it is, right? Like, I'm curious. I'm going to do some research on that after this video. Very curious on if that's still around. In 1863, President Seward would sign the Homestead Act, which would allow farmers to buy massive amounts of land to own. He would also sign the Enrollment Act, which would have essentially created the draft for the Civil War, and there would be riots per the signing of this act. 1864, President Seward would sign the Coinage Act, which would establish coins, which would establish like little coins for our country. In the 1864, not 1964, 1864, the 1864 election, where Republican President William Seward would defeat Federalist George McClellan 172 to 61 to win re-election. Why he's a Federalist and not a Democrat would be McClellan would actually be a Federalist in this timeline, since Federalists would be, they'd be the Whig Party, essentially. They wouldn't be anti-slavery, they'd be more pro-compromise, pretty much. Where the radical Republicans would have their own party where they're anti-slavery, and the Democrats are pro-slavery, while the Federalists are pro-compromise, essentially. And McClellan would be in that, a pro-union, pro-compromise state. And Democrats would essentially be fizzled out. The Northern Democrats would join the Federalist Party, creating this pro-compromise, pro-union type of party. But he would end up losing to President Seward in this election. Going on to 1865, the 13th Amendment would be ratified, which abolished slavery, and he would declare the KKK a threat to the Union. Going on to 1866, the Memphis Riot, which was be race riots in 1866. And he would also pass the Metric Act of 1868, which pretty much establishes inches, centimeters, miles, etc. Going on to 1867, President Seward would buy Alaska for, I think, $7.2 million, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. And he would also create, sign, and pass the Alaska Statehood Act, which would give statehood to Alaska many, many years in advance, but there would also be a yellow fever pandemic. Going on to 1868, the Civil War has ended by this point, so good news, whoop whoop. The 14th Amendment would be ratified, which established the naturalization process for a U.S. citizen, and the 1868 presidential election, where Republican General Ulysses Grant defeats Federalist Governor Horatio Seymour 161 and 136 to become the 16th president, so Grant still becomes president in this timeline. In 1869, there is nothing noteworthy. Going on to 1870, the 15th Amendment is ratified, which gives minorities the right to vote, not just blacks. If you pay attention, they're talking about every minority, so they thought ahead. We would also see the the state of Utah. The Utah riot, which was another race riot for response to the 15th Amendment. Going on to 1871, President Grant would sign the Ku Klux Klan Act, pretty much forwarding President Seward's declaration that the KKK was a threat. We would also have the whaling disaster of 1871 and the Wickenburg massacre. Hold on, someone's calling me. Going on to 1872, there would be the Great Boston Fire of 1872, that still happens. And Republican President Ulysses Grant would defeat Federalist Ambassador Charles Adams, 196-156 to win re-election. Charles Adams would be more of a proponent in this timeline, as he would have already been a Federalist. Same thing as John Quincy Adams and John Adams, the two former presidents. Though he wouldn't be as lucky, as he would still lose to Grant, who Grant would be popular due to the Civil War, which he wasn't that great of a president, honestly, but, you know. Going on to 1873, President Grant would sign the Coinage Act of 1873, which would end bimetallism. Going on to 1874, President Grant would sign a trading agreement with Hawaii. 1875, President Grant would sign the Civil Rights Act of 1875, which ends discrimination in public places and public juries. And he would also sign the Page Act of 1875. We now go on to the 1876 election. Federalist Governor Rutherford B. Hayes would defeat Republican Congressman William Wheeler, 246 to 123, to become the 17th president. Rutherford Hayes pretty much being a compromise candidate between the leftist Federalists as well as the, well, more right-winged Federalists who are leaning towards radical Republican but aren't really. I said that wrong, it's the other way around, but whatever. Going on 1877, Reconstruction would officially end. Hallelujah. Going on 1878, President Hayes would sign the Bland-Ellison Act, and we would also have a yellow fever epidemic. 1879, nothing noteworthy. As we go on to 1880, John Sherman would get the Republican nomination, as he would flip back the presidency back to the Republican Party, as he would face off Federalist Congressman James Garfield, and he would beat him 210 to 159 to become the 18th president. And thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. This is the Chaotic One saying peace.